Hello, my dear students, and welcome to week 2 in our class in PF 101 Event Driven Programming. In this session, we will only be reviewing our knowledge in graphical user interface programming using the Swing package in Java. By this time, we'll be building a very simple UI using Swing, but this time we'll be writing only pure coding. We will not be using any GUI design tools which are available in the some integrated development environments such as NetBeans or JetBrains IntelliJ IDEA. We'll be coding everything from here. So the design for the GUI design will be using this one, wherein we have three components. Very simple. The first one is a label, followed below it will be a text field, and below will be a button. So let's get on with it. Into our we'll be using this time the Visual Studio Code editor, and I already have here a blank class for us. And so we'll put everything again in the main method. This one style. If you are writing a very simple GUI application, you can just put it on the main method. But of course, it is not. This is not the best way to do it, especially when you're working with more uh, real-world application. But for the sake of demonstration, we'll just make it simple as possible. So we'll have a main method. And in this main method, we'll first, of course, define our frame. So here we'll have define our frame, which of course will be using the JFrame class. And we'll give it a title of my GUI. And we need to import the JFrame, of course, coming from the javax.swing package. Next is we are going to configure our frame, like for the size. We'll just make it 300 by 150. That means 300 in width and 150 in height. 300 pixels across and 150 pixels from top to bottom. Next is we'll define our default closing action. So frame dot set default close operation, and we'll simply be doing exit on close. Next is I would like this frame to appear in the middle, and that's very simple to do by simply calling in frame that set location relative to and give it a null value, which means it is not relative to anything and therefore will be displayed in the middle of the screen. And then based on our design, as you can see here, we can decide on what layout we are going to use. As far as I can see, there are three components in 3 rows. And when we're speaking about rows, the layout that comes to mind would be grid layout. In this case, we'll have 3 rows and 1 column. So let's go ahead and create our grid layout. And in our grid layout, we're going to have 3 for the rows and 1 for the columns. And for each component, we'll have a division of up to 5 pixels. And of course, we're going to import grid layout. And for some reason, the grid layout cannot be imported, or the Visual Studio Code editor do not know where to import grid layout. So I will have to manually add it here, java.awt and grid layout. Okay, now let's define our components. It's going to be a label, a text field, and a button. So we'll first have our label. And the text here would be, what is your name? Again, import that. Then we'll have our text field. And again, import this guy. Also, we'll have our button. And again, import JButton. Now we can put these components into our frame. First, the component that we are going to add into the frame would be our label. So frame.add label. Next is the text field. Frame.add name field. However, for button, since based on our drawing, we are not going to, it looks like this. If we are going to add button right now, what will happen is the whole button will be stretched across the whole row, occupying all the available space in terms of width. But that's not what we want to do in this case, diba? So what we can do here is we are going to put this button on a panel, and the panel will be the ones added into the frame. So what will happen is the panel will be stretched across the width of the available spaces of the row. And since the default layout of the J panel is flow layout, the button inside of the panel will not be resized but will simply occupy whatever space it actually needs. So before we add, we'll have to add a new panel here. And again, the default layout of a panel is flow layout. On the other hand, the default layout of the frame, of the JFrame, is border layout. So let's import also the panel. And once we have our panel created, we can now add the button into the panel, just like that. And now that the panel is having the button inside of it, we can now add the panel into the frame. So frame.add panel. All right. And finally, we'll make the frame visible. Frame.set visible. Oops, double to true. Okay. And what this problem says is that we created the grid layout, but we are not using it. So that's a problem here, is that we only created the grid layout but was not applied into our frame. So we have to apply that into our frame here. So frame.set layout, and put there the variable layout. There we go. So when we click on our run button, we'll see our output. Just exactly what we wanted. We have here a label and a text field and a button. Of course, nothing will happen because we're not writing any program as to the what actions we're going to perform when we click on the button. That is actually the cream of our lesson in event-driven programming. Now let's have another example. We have here another layout wherein it looks a little bit more complex. We now have 7 components arranged this way. So as you can see here, we are going to have 3 labels, 2 text fields, and this time we'll have a combo box and a button that is placed on the rightmost of our bottom right part of the screen, or of the frame. Okay, so let's create a new file. This time we'll have it arithmetic. Okay, this time we're not going to use the same way of writing code where we pack everything inside of a main method. This time we'll take a different design pattern for building a GUI, wherein we are going to follow along a object-oriented design pattern. This time we're going to make the arithmetic class into a JFrame. So we say extends JFrame. So now arithmetic class is now a JFrame, or a subclass of the JFrame, and thus inherits all of the inheritable properties and methods of a JFrame. And this time we're going to build up our UI on the constructor of this class. So public arithmetic, and here we're going to define the frame itself. Since arithmetic is the frame, we don't have to call the name, just immediately call upon the methods. First, we'll have a set title, simple arithmetic. I'll have it the size. Based on here, we're probably going to have a set size of 400 by 300, or maybe just 250. We'll see. All right, and the default close operation is going to be exit on close. So you'll if you notice, the call to exit on close is just bare, while here we said jframe.exit and close. That's because my GUI is not a JFrame and does not have this constant, while here in the arithmetic is a JFrame and therefore contains this constant. And you may also see that all the methods are called or invoked directly. That's because, again, arithmetic is now a subclass of the JFrame and therefore inherits all these methods. All right, so let's take a look at our design again, so that we can decide what layout are we going to apply. And based on what I see here, we have here clearly a grid layout wherein we have 3 rows and 2 columns. However, the button cannot be placed in that same layout, so we have to put it in a separate container having its own layout. And since it is now it is not stretched along the width and it is flush to the right, then I could say that this will be using here a flow layout with leading alignment. So it means that since this is a different layout here, we're gonna have a more bigger layout to encompass all of them. And it's so safe to say that we can simply use the default layout of the frame, which is a border layout, so that we'll have another container containing all these 6 with having a grid layout placed on the center, while having a flow layout placed on the south of the frame. All right, so let's do this. First, we'll have a JPanel for the components. We'll call this center panel. Oops. And the layout for this is going to be a grid layout. We'll make a shortcut to setting the layout. So center panel dot set layout. I'm gonna say new grid layout inside of here. And again, the grid layout is going to have 3 rows and 2 columns. And again, we separate each component with 5 pixels. And import grid layout here. All right. Next, we'll have another panel. Call this bottom panel. New J panel, and we'll set the layout here to a new flow layout with we'll be calling here flow layout dot trailing, so that the components will be starting from the right. Okay. So next, let's define our UI components. Now, in this design pattern, we'll be using our UI components in a way that they should be accessible by other methods within this class. For example, this text field, this these two text field and this combo box must be accessible in other methods within the class. So to do this, we have to declare all these three on a separate on the global level. So here above we'll have private JText field. We'll have field 1 and field 2 and J combo box operator box. Let's call it operator, right? And of course, let's import all this. Okay, so these are the three fields that we need to access globally. That's why they are to be declared outside. And now let's instantiate all this. Have field 1 is equal to new J text field, field 2 J text field as well. Then operator is equal to new J combo box. And let's add some contents into the operator. We want to have a um, list of operations such as add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So just do that here. Operator that add item. Just have sum. And just add some more, subtract, multiply, and divide. All right. And also there are plenty other ways of populating contents into a combo box. For example, instead of having our add items here, we can create a array of strings which will then be passed into our new combo box instantiation. In fact, let's try and do that. Let's just have here string array of strings, operators, ops, and it's gonna be sum, subtract, or it should be add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Like that. And here we'll pass in the operators. Okay, that would also work. So now we'll put all these components into our center panel. First, we are going to add the label for the first component, the first number. So it's a label, a new J label first number. And of course, let's import this as well. And let's just copy this. And this time we'll have second number. But of course, after the first number, you have to add the field 1 first. So center panel dot add field 1 right here. And here we copy field 2. Next is we add the label for the operator, center panel that add new J label operator. Is it operator or operation? And we add also the operator object. And that's it for our center panel. Next is we're going to add into the bottom panel a J button. or this is compute button. And add this into the bottom panel. Just like that. Now, all we have to do is add a center panel into the center of the frame and add the bottom panel at the south of the frame. So we simply say add center panel. You don't have to add any more parameters because the default position in border layout is the center. So if you're not going to say which part of the border layout you're going to add a particular component, it is going to be added into the center. However, for the bottom panel, we have to say border layout dot south, and of course we need to it's automatically imported border layout, right? Okay, so we have added all the two groups into our frame. So now we can just view it, set. Oh no, we'll just have to make it set visible when we create it. Now, of course, this class do not have the main method yet. So now we'll just create the main method. And from here, we're gonna instantiate a new arithmetic class and set it to visible, just like that. All right, just try and run this program. Let's see what's our output. Okay, we forgot one thing, day. Kaya nung wala siya mo gawa sa tunga, as because we don't have the set location relative to null. Right? Once again, let's run. And there we go. We have our program running exactly using our layout. First number, second number, and our operation are intact in our compute button. Of course, this thing will not work yet because once again, we did not have any code covering the events, which is what we're going to do next later. So that would be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching and see you again in the next week.